introduce you to Dr. Joe Griffin, a speaker, consultant, and author's intention is teaching and talk is to broaden their vision, the things they weren't taught when they brought up as children. Reach for the top, regardless of situations, predicaments, or your conditions. He's making history, all of the districts, and creating retention from teachers. 50 to 80% that ain't all that you hear me. He is the mentor. He paved the way with his tip methodology, really. Dream, be persistent, face fears, seek change, go out and go get it. This what you learning with Dr. Joe Griffin. With Dr. Joe Griffin, yeah. He says recognize trauma, push past the pain. If you got a problem, go look at his frame. Work your perspective and look at it change. Find a goal, set it in critical thing. Manage time, self-awareness. These are the few of the things he's trying to get you to do every day. Do every day. Led 5 schools to increase test scores with his teacher-principal collaboration. Things he gives to you will have you take your drive to the next level. But first, you need to get some fuel at gas station. Supporting education leaders, creating a culture for kids that'll last for ages. Lack of access to quality professional development, that's outrageous. Got his doctorate in education. Leadership, research, make changes. Need to put the kids first and raise them. Need to teach them they worth, stop playing. Later on, they gon' run this nation. Dr. Joe with his dissertation taught to those who would fix, make changes. I introduce you to Dr. Joe Griffin, a speaker, consultant, and author's intentions. The teaching and talk is to broaden their vision, the things they weren't taught when they brought up as children. Reach for the top, regardless of situations, predicaments, or your conditions. He's making history, all of the districts, and creating retention from teachers. 50 to 80% they ain't know that you hear me. He is the mentor. He paved the way with his dip methodology, really. Dream, be persistent, face fears, seek change, go out and go get it. This what you learning with Dr. Joe Griffin. With Dr. Joe Griffin.
Great day, leaders. Great day. Welcome to week 18 of the Speaking Life in You Leadership live stream, where we talk leadership dynamics, personal and professional growth, educational trends, and provide solutions to help you with school improvement to create a culture of collaboration. Let's go. It's indeed another great day, you all. Week 18. It's a pleasure to be here. Thankful, blessed. Definitely happy holidays to everyone. It's a time of year where you just got to reminisce. You got to reminisce and just be thankful for being here. Everyone did not make it. Everyone not have this opportunity to see this day on today. So understand, be glad, and rejoice in it. I'm extremely happy. We have a great show lined up for you today. As you start streaming in, definitely put in the chat where you're streaming in from. And that's whether you're live or whether you're coming back, catching the recording. You all, I'm thankful for you all because I'm seeing the numbers. I'm seeing that you are watching each week. You're DMing me. You're telling me that you're getting value from the information that we provide each week. We've had superintendents, principals, assistant principals, and today we got a counselor. So we're going to get to that here in a moment, and we're going to talk deeply about generational curses, as well as some more. And as you implore upon these last 30 days of the year, know that you've got to finish strong. You got to finish strong. You got to keep going no matter what. No matter what. And that does not mean that you don't deal with the issues that you go through, because naturally you've got to provide a place and a space to be able to heal, to move through, to get through, to keep going. But understand that you must keep going. Whatever it is that you're dealing with, it can't stop you, it can't end you, because you've got to, again, keep going. Know that positivity rules, you all. Positive anything is better than negative nothing every single day of the week. So be positive. And some people say you could be too positive. Well, understand that there's power in the mind. As we think, so are we. So continue to be positive throughout everything. Understand that you're a resilient creature and you're made to keep going no matter what you go through. Know that losses, they teach us lessons. They allow us opportunities to make adjustments. They allow us to come back stronger, to go hard, to be better than we were ever before. Than we even thought that we could be. Remember, you're stronger than you ever thought you are. You braver than you ever thought you could be. And you got more do-itness about yourself than you ever thought you had. So you can do it. And lastly, y'all, this is the key. We got to reboot our thinking. This is the missing art. Understand that we have the power to reboot our thinking. What you put into yourself is what's going to come out. So if you've got toxicity, you've got negative things going on, things that pulling at you, remember, you got to put some positive inputs so that those negative inputs can be alleviated and allow yourself, again, space for that healing. Talk positive to yourself. And we're going to do our affirmations here in a bit once we get our guest out. But again, finish strong, keep going, no matter what. You must do it. Y'all, please like, comment, subscribe, share out. We do not want to keep all this great information that we're getting each week to ourselves. We got to put it in the atmosphere, you all. We got to put it in the atmosphere. I know it's good stuff. All right. And another thing I got coming up in the next couple of weeks, first off, I'm going to do a detailed review of my track record as principal, kind of detailing how we were able to pull scores up at the various schools. I know that's really important. Also, I want to quickly mention that from now through December 13th, 2 for 1 on any service. And I've got a number of services, so it's important that you kind of check with me, get a proposal. I can get that out to you, and then we'll kind of go from there. But 2 for 1 on any services through December 13th. I'm probably just going to take the first 7 or 8 people. Okay, and that's institutions, organizations, or individuals. Again, 2 for 1 on any service. Okay, so let's reach out and see what we are. Also, as you continue to think about Black History Month, remember that you're going to need a speaker to come in and talk to your students and adults. And I've got this speech, Dream with Desire, honoring the past, building our future. So I want to quickly tout those as well before we get into our really deep conversation today. And I bring our guest to the stage. Got his bio right here. I'm going to read it. I'm excited, you all, to have this gentleman. We've been acquainted for a while now, and I see the work that he does, and I wanted to be able to highlight him as well because, again, this show is about empowerment. It's about collaboration. It's about creating connections, and we try to model that each week, and at the same time provide you professional development value so that you can go out and be the best educator, the best person, and you can apply these principles into any field that you're in. So, DeAntwann DJ Johnson is a multifaceted educator and advocate, a devoted husband and father, accomplished author, and the dynamic force behind DJ Inspires LLC. His credentials extend from being a parenting and youth empowerment coach to a qualified counselor and astute sports statistician. With a life story that is both humbling and inspirational, DJ's narrative resonates deeply within educational environments, making him an invaluable asset to institutions committed to holistic student well-being. DJ's journey is a testament to the transformative power of resilience and mentorship. Navigating a tumultuous upbringing that included 9 arduous years in Indiana's foster care system, experiences of child abuse, domestic violence, and emotional trauma, he emerged not as a statistic, but as a beacon of hope and empowerment. There was a time when DJ considered ending it all, yet transformative realization steered him toward a greater purpose. Guided by mentors who saw the untapped potential within him, he rose above a life replete with challenges, overcoming humiliation, aggression, and self-esteem issues to become a stalwart advocate for you. You all, it is my pleasure to bring DJ Inspires Johnson to
What's
the
going on?
What's going on, brother DJ? How you doing today?
Doing well, doing well. Hey, it's funny when I was in the what do they call it, the waiting room. I
Yeah.
was grooving it. I was grooving to your intro song. That was pretty dope.
Okay. Appreciate it. Yeah. Want to make something that connect, but that also has a powerful message. So I appreciate that nod right there.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So I mean, let's open up, give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about what makes you the expert on generational curses and a little bit about yourself. You know?
Yeah. So DJ Johnson. I grew up in Indiana. Before I went into the foster care system, I experienced a lot of trauma. My dad, mom and dad had me when they were 16. Dad walked out of my life early on. Mom was kind of forced to pick up the pieces. Ended up marrying my stepdad, who kind of introduced the abusiveness and all the different things that were kind of happening in that moment. Experienced a house fire when I was in third grade, I believe, and that kind of opened the door for us going into homelessness, and then eventually within a year going into the foster care system. And so um, that journey kind of led me onto a path of, I had some amazing people in my life, from my grandmother, who I initially lived with in the foster care system, to my mentor, Mr. Hines, who I see as a father figure even to this day, who just kind of steered me in the right time, in the right direction, to pursue education and pursue different opportunities to make something of myself, to do something differently than the path that was going to be set for me, with parents who didn't graduate from high school, parents in and out of jail, parents drug addicts at some points in my childhood, I should say. And so that kind of steered me in the direction, my mentor and different people in my life steered me in the direction of going to school. I ultimately graduated from high school, ultimately went to college. And when I went to college, Joe, if I could be honest, I didn't I wasn't thinking educational or counseling or any route. I was thinking sports. Like, I was always playing sports growing up. I was heavily involved
Oh,
in it, huge sports fan. And so that was my path out of high school. I went to college and pursued a degree in kinesiology. Um, Ultimately turned into movement and sports science when I transferred to a different university, and then got my first master's in coaching and athletic administration. And so I was on the path. I got an internship at UCLA, and I was killing it there, doing a good job. And after that internship, was a year-long internship. And once that finished, I was applying to all these jobs across the country. And then there was one job, or actually none of the jobs reached out. All the jobs would either be like, we selected somebody else. Sorry, we didn't select your application. I just got rejection email after rejection email. And so I finally just prayed on it and was like, all right, what's the path? What's the journey that I should be on? And ultimately, what ended up happening was I opened up my search and ended up finding a job at a nonprofit where I worked as a mentor for foster and probation youth. And that really was the kind of turn for me into the work that I do now, where I speak across the country. I am a counselor at a school districts and different things that I contract with, and I do the work to help students break their generational curses. Because for a long time, I didn't even know what that meant. I didn't even understand that I was in the midst of a curse. Having had parents that didn't graduate from high school, in and out of jail, different things like that. And so I was intentionally and unintentionally breaking those curses by pursuing different avenues and different opportunities. And my main motivation initially was that I was the oldest, and I wanted to be that beacon of hope for my siblings behind me. And so that was kind of how it started for me. Initially into sports, but eventually kind of getting steered in the direction of, how can I use my story of resilience to help students who, I learned when I went into the field, need that story so much.
so powerful using sports as an avenue to create a different path for yourself. Like so many of us, that's one of the
Hmm.
things that allow me to take the path that I've taken as well, getting those scholarships and going in and changing mentality, transforming mindsets through education. And that's one of the things that helped me also. And I heard you talk a little bit about your background, and definitely touching. I definitely feel for all of what you were saying, and I want to dig deeper because we got people out here who are listening, who are watching, who can grow, who can learn, who can be inspired by you. And I know that's why you call yourself DJ Inspires.
Right.
So generational curses, they are often unspoken, often not talked about, kind of pushed to the side and act like it's not even a real thing. And people who aren't empathetic to generational curses and to it as a real life thing don't really understand how they affect people. So as we open up our conversation, DJ, will you define generational curses and tell why it's important for educators and leaders to be able to recognize them in the communities that they serve?
Yeah, so a generational curse, generational cycle, there's different terms that people use, but it's kind of this path in this journey that a family is set on, that if they don't, take drastic measures in some cases to deviate from the path that the family is going on, that is what we term a generational curse. So, for instance, for my family, my parents didn't graduate from high school, and I'm not really sure if their parents did, but there was something there, right?
Right.
My parents had me at 16, and so the pattern could have been teenage pregnancy being passed down. And so these are, there's alcoholism, there's trauma, abuse, all these different things can be passed down innately. And some people are like, how does that happen? Well, I remember going through my trauma and not even realizing that it was trauma, honestly, until I got to college. And
Right.
so what it was is this was all I knew. If I got in trouble at school, there's a chance that I might get beat if I get home. If my stepdad gets drunk, there's a chance that there might be a huge argument and fight and the police might get called. That's just a normal day. For me personally growing up, and what I've learned with working with my students is that that's just a normal day for them. But an educator who maybe didn't experience those things or haven't experienced that type of trauma in their lives would look at their student who's struggling, but not. I always like to say, behavior is communication. So not understand what they're communicating from the behavior that they're seeing in their face in the classroom. So in the classroom, they see a kid acting out, being rambunctious, not listening, not doing different things. But if they were me growing up, you didn't realize that last night I witnessed my stepdad beat the crap out of my mom. The police was called. He went to jail, and my mom had to be tended by medical EMS people. Oh, but you want me to listen in your class, you want me to pay attention in your class, you want me to do these math things in your class, but you're not being sensitive to the things that I'm struggling with at home. So generational curse or pattern are these traumatic different things that get passed down in the family, and a person either falls in line with that because that's all they know and they don't know anything differently, or they're not exposed to different, or you can go deviate from that and go in a different direction. And so that's what generational curses are. And so as an educator, it's understanding, especially if you work in Title I schools, if you work in low income neighborhoods, these are things that you almost have to expect in terms of, like, okay, what are these students coming into the school, but most importantly, coming into my classroom with? And so as educators, it's just kind of having an understanding, like, this is what's possible, and how when they come into my class, if you have the capacity, I know teachers are overworked, underpaid, we can have that conversation for another day. But in terms of us being more available or more able to understand the struggles of the students that are in our classroom, for me, it's as simple as I said earlier, if you see a behavior, try to figure out what is that behavior communicating to you. And we'll go a little bit more into how do we get to that space where we're connecting and finding out what that means. But ultimately, it's understanding that our students are coming into the classroom with struggles and challenges that we could never fathom. And so how can we hold space and be empathetic to that and hold them accountable with those educational goals?
Definitely. You said something key in your statement. And one of the things you said was recognize your traumas. And I just had to add this up at this
Yeah.
point, because recognizing your traumas is one of the key pillars of being able to push past pain or push past pains. And
Yeah.
that's key in the DIP approach for student and adult success. That's one of the key pillars. So I appreciate you making that mention. I
Mhm.
also heard you talk about some of the things that you've gone through to overcome. And I've had a few students, I've had a few situations as well where generational curses were really, really prevalent. Even with in my own life, divorce, having kids out of wedlock, I'll be vulnerable right now. Things like that
Mhm.
are generational curses within my family. And I even had students. I had one student who was an exceptional education student, but he was determined to break the traditions that he had seen throughout his families. And that young man is now traveling the world. He's a big time
Mhm.
accountant, doing all types of things. What have you seen, or can you share some examples where recognizing and addressing a generational curse led to a transformation for either students or adults?
Yeah, there was a student who I literally was just looking at his. I follow him on Instagram, and so worked with him years ago. And he's kind of working, has his own family now, and just seeing him through his pictures interact with his little girl. He has a daughter, maybe like 1 or 2. I don't know how old she is, but I remember having conversations with him when he was in high school about his relationship with his mom and how it was a challenge for him, and his relationship or lack thereof with his dad. And so how can he get into a space where his father wasn't necessarily involved or interactive in his life, and now him years later becoming a father and essentially shifting that generational curse and is heavily involved in his child's life. It's just something that when you get an opportunity to see it, because I know if I could speak to educators for a moment, there's a lot of work that we do that is thankless work. There's a lot of work that we do that you may never get the opportunity to see that that seed that you plant grow and harvest into something beautiful. And so the moments and the opportunities that you get to see that harvest is such a beautiful thing to keep you going in this work that can be so challenging sometimes. And then I think of my parents that I work with. I work with and do workshops for parents, but it definitely wasn't something that I was like super excited to do. Like I didn't want nothing to do with parents. I wanted it all to be student work. But the more I started working with students, the more I realized that I needed to talk to parents because I can't be healing and helping students go through and manage their generational curses if they're still being subjected to parents who are still stuck in theirs. And so, in the work with parents, I've seen and had conversations with them. And from an empathetic standpoint, I think a lot of times when I do parent workshops, I personally try to keep it from being a situation where I'm gonna tell you how to parent and call you out for every mistake that you make like that. No, that's not what we're doing here. We all understand that this is a challenging job as a parent, no matter if you have the tools or you don't have the tools. It's challenging either way. And for me, I just try to hold space. Like, hey, this is hard. This is challenging. How can I help you? Okay, let me help you understand your teenager a little bit better. Let me help you understand how when things used to be a certain way for us and how it's translating for your child right now. And so it's helping them really paint the picture of like, yeah, we did things a certain way in the back in the day, but let's talk about how you handle things now. You see the connection, right? Your parent used to yell at you for every little mistake, and now you are, you're anxious and you got a lot of anxiety and you get a little nervous at work and stuff. That those things come together. So how can
Yeah,
we try to eliminate these patterns for our children and do it differently? Not necessarily saying goodbye to the old way, but taking the good parts of the old way and figuring out how we can implement new stuff to make this thing a little bit better for us.
definitely. That recognition piece is something else.
Mhm.
I hear all the time about parents trying to live through their children and uh, living their life through children, that kind of thing, and wanting to do everything that they used to do or what have you. So we subconsciously as well as consciously sometimes pass that down, and being aware of that, I think, would be one way to kind of minimize the impact of doing such. So right here, definitely want to get a little crowd input. Have you all seen patterns, good or bad, that you see repeating in your community? Share in the chat, think about it in your head, but being able to recognize those generational curses. Want to give just a little time to allow you to share those in the chat, or at least just to think about it for yourself, because this is a very real thing. Very real thing. And while we're giving a little wait time, that's powerful information, DJ. Powerful information. And we'll kind of keep moving along in the conversation as far as bridging gaps in wellness for all. A big part of that, breaking those curses, is bridging those gaps between students and adults. So as leaders, as teachers, there's a role that we have to play in making that connection, especially when that recognition or that self-awareness or that social awareness of what's really happening is not there. Because if it's not known, it's not known. What are some ways the leaders can help make this connection so that we can address those gaps and foster wellness in our schools?
One of the things that you said in the beginning intro is how important the mindset is. And what I find with adults, with parents, with educators, is that there's this mindset shift that needs to happen with the way that they view their students. And what I mean by that is, I hear often adults say, kids these days are different, or kids these days ain't like what they used to, right? And I can understand that, and I can validate that to a certain extent. But I think statements like that keep you from seeing the student in a way that allows you to be more empathetic to their struggle, that allow you to be more understanding of what these students are coming into your classroom with. And so for me, there's a mindset shift that has to happen. There has to be an understanding of what teenagers are dealing with. They're exposed to social media. Yes, we understand that. We know that it could be a problem. It could be an issue. But we have to recognize that as a stressor and then as an anxious thing for them. But I remember being in high school and being picked on, and I only had to worry about being picked on at school. I could go home and I'll have some relief. These kids will get picked on at school, then they got to go on social media and they're gonna get picked on. It's a whole different beast. So I think as a educator, as a parent, that mindset shift of just saying, I think the biggest issue that I see with adults and the young people now is that they feel like these young people don't have any issues. They don't have anything to be struggling about. And that's the biggest mistake that you can make if you're working with young people. To invalidate their struggle, to invalidate the things that they're going through is the biggest mistake that we can make as educators. And so for me, it's that mindset shift first. How can I shift my mindset from thinking that kids these days and they get on your nerves? Trust me, I'm as about as I can connect with a student with the best of them, but that doesn't mean that they don't get on my nerves, right? But also that doesn't stop me from connecting with them and understanding their struggle and understanding what they're going through and holding space to hear them out and hear what their challenges are. And being the adult, one of the few adults in their lives who's gonna really hear them and listen to what they have to say. And so I think it's that mindset shift first of understanding teenagers, understanding the struggles that they're going through. And then if you are working with them, it's also understanding brain development and child development. Like this is such an underrated thing I see in education because I see adults getting upset at teenagers, at young people for things. And I'm like, that's actually developmentally appropriate. And you're upset about something and they really can't even help in this moment. And so understanding child development, understanding the struggles that these young people are going through is just a one way to really get yourself in position to be more empathetic to what they're dealing with and them being more open to come to you when it comes down to struggles or challenges that they're dealing with.
Yeah. I think we have to constantly remind ourselves that we all experience things differently. We grew up in the same household. We have the same parents. We participate in a lot of the same activities. But perspective is totally different. And I think that a couple of things that leaders can do especially for staff to create that space, is in-house mentoring programs or reflection circles, shall I say, reflection circles for adults, and then for your students, in-house mentoring programs where they can do some of those things that you were talking about, express themselves, have an open place and space where they can start the healing process, because that's what it is when dealing with generational curses. In order to move forward from them, you got to make sure that that healing is occurring, and doesn't happen overnight.
No. And to your point, and you could probably answer this as well. Like, I've worked with students from multiple straight F, suspended for smoking, all these different things, a student from that realm to a student that's straight A's and applying to all these, high academic institutions. Every student that I've asked has had, like, I've asked them, Who's your favorite person on campus? Who's your favorite teacher on campus?" And not one student has not had an answer for me. It's either the security guard, or it's, oh, my first period teacher. He's the best. Like, there's an adult in the child's life that meets that mark for them, that sees them in a way that other adults don't see them. And so if I've had every student, and we're talking thousands of students over the years who've had at least one adult on campus that they can go to, why can't we be that adult? Why can't we be that one adult who's like, hey, I'm holding space for y'all. I'm gonna hold you accountable. We're nobody's saying that, but like, being there in a different way that these students don't typically see or get either at home or beyond that.
That's a perfect segue into the next particular question, because it's really, really important to know that to make that, you got to make that connection. Connection leads to empowerment, and then empowerment can then lead to collaboration, where we actually are doing things together. We're moving the plans forward, and we're in a place where the vision is become shared. So I heard you talk about that. How does making that connection enhance mental, emotional, and social well-being for everyone that's involved?
Yeah, I think is you when you're making an attempt to connect with a student, that shows you're invested. But also understanding, because I think we always make fun of the young people because they want things right now. But I think adults are guilty of that as well. Like, we make one shift in our strategy, and we expect our student to be behaved right away. Like, hey, I made this shift, DJ, and they ain't did nothing differently. Like, it takes time. These things take time, right? And so when I think of, like,
Yeah.
finding ways to connect as an educator, it's one thing that I do is I'll see a student with their headphones in, and I'll flag them down, and I'll say, "Hey, what you listening to right now?" And it's just that I don't I could probably not care about the person that they're listening to, but I took the time to just be invested in what they're listening to. And there's been times where students have told me who they're listening to these days, and I've looked them up, listened to them, came back and reported back to them like, "Hey, you know what? I actually like him. We got some good flow."
Yeah.
Little things like that. Takes 2 minutes, 3 minutes for me to make that investment and come back. Um, Another ways to be connected is just, you see a student down, or see a student by themselves, just check in, like, hey, how things going? Like, no, for real, like, don't give me that fluffy answer, like, for real, let me know how you're doing, like, check in. I want to check in with you, right? Those little things, even if a student that I don't even work with, I'll just tap in with them, because for me, I'm always thinking about planting seeds in this work. Like, I understand that sometimes this work is going to take forever. It's going to take time for you to see some results from the work that you put in with these students. But I just look at it as, all right, let me plant this seed. Let me see where this is going to go. Let me and just hope and have faith that it's going to grow into something beautiful. So it's just talking. I think that's the communication part is so important. Those are easy ways for us to connect, making sure we can check in with students, especially if you're a teacher. I know if you have like 30 kids, it might take you maybe a couple weeks to tap in with each student whenever you have those pockets of time to be able to do so. But just finding ways to be a little bit invested. I'm not asking you to be all up in their business, but it's just taking that time to show that you care on a different level, right? Because I think we expect so much of our students, especially at the high school level. It's like, hey, you got to come to class and be on time. We got to have these grades on point. We got to get you ready for college. And it's like, all right, but what am I getting out of this as a student? I know that's long term. I see that I'm gonna graduate and life and stuff is gonna happen, but I'm going through some stuff right now, and I just need you to be a little bit invested in what's there for me. So those are ways that I feel like helps, and when we're able to connect in that way, it's challenges them to be more in tune with their mental and emotional well being, because it's like, all right, somebody else is just as invested in this as I am, and so now I can, for me personally, I know when I had my mentor, I was always wanting to do right by him because of the time that he invested into me.
Definitely, definitely. Those check-ins with both students and adults, they really, really do go a long way.
Hmm.
And I'm a firm believer that the better position mentally that we ensure our teachers are in, the better
Yeah,
position mentally that they will ensure that our students are in.
100%.
Kind of take that a step further. I used to always do Friday roundups with staff just to
Hmm.
kind of bring everyone in to see how their week went, as well as prep them and inspire them for the upcoming week. So that's one thing that we did with our leaders. And also, just I think last week or the week before, one of our guests, we were talking about a Wellness Wednesday for
Mm.
students where we have embedded SEL programs, opportunity for students to check in, as well as kind of let the teacher or advisor know where they are, what their temperature looks like, and
Hmm.
provide them the necessary next steps that they can. Again, want to get a little crowd engagement going right here. I know that our people, they definitely watch. Sometimes the
Hmm.
participation lags a little bit, but they are here when I look at the numbers. So I'm appreciative of that. What's one way that your school community promotes wellness for both students and adults? Put it in the chat, think about it, say it loud, write it as well as share out, because people are watching and we want to share this information. And as we're doing that, as you're putting those things in the chat, we're going to keep the conversation rolling as well. As we talk about changing that narrative, it begins with the mindsets. As I mentioned earlier, and as you brought up as well. And DJ, we know that's easier said than done. The
Hmm.
mind is a powerful thing, and until you actually learn that you are the controller of it, that you can rewire it and reboot it to do whatever it is that you want it to do, that could be a problem. And it's crucial that you understand that before you can be able to break from some of those barriers, those limiting beliefs, and those cycles. What are some of the key strategies that you use to help students and adults shift their mindsets toward growth and possibility?
For students, it's bringing that realization to their situation without shutting them, without making them feel some type of way about it, but just bringing a level of awareness of like, hey, this is kind of what's currently there for you. These are the patterns or the different things that I see based off of different things that I've seen in my life and students that I've worked with in the past. And it's just kind of shedding light, bringing some awareness to kind of what's there for them. So when I meet with students individually, I do what we call a screening interview conversation, and that conversation is strictly me just asking questions, and I use it to get to know, get to understand their situation. In these questions, I find out who they live with, um, and what the situation is with that. So typically, I'll find that the dad is not in the home, or I'll find that, it's like 8 people living in a two-bedroom house or apartment. And so you find little trinkets, you find out who they trust. A lot of lately, a lot of students are like, I don't trust nobody.
Right.
And so I just,
Grown
you know,
people too.
I get to learn and understand their situation, and through those questions I can kind of pick up, okay, you got 8 people in a two-bedroom house, you probably don't have some time to yourself, or you probably don't have time to just kind of depress from a long day at school. Like, so I start to put two and two together, and I think what really is the thing that I think I help them out with the most is just like, I let them know, like, even though that's a normal situation, it doesn't, like, it typically isn't a normal situation. Like, these are things that you don't necessarily have to go through. You just happen to be going through it because of the situation that you're in. And so you can either decide to continue down this path, or I can expose you to something differently if this is something that you want to change about what's going on in your situation. So it's an awareness piece of their situation and what they're going through. And then from that, once we bring some awareness to it, then you can kind of implement things that are going to help them start to make those changes. And so I introduce coping skills or self care or different things that they can do personally. And then it's stuff that they probably are already doing, but we just bring awareness to it. Like, oh, you listen to music when you get stressed out? That's a coping skill. That's something that you do when you need to distract yourself from the different stressors that you're dealing with in the day. And so we bring that to them. And then it's just the accountability piece beyond that. And so we bring some awareness, equip them with the skills that's going to help them manage their stress, their emotions, and different things. And then the follow up, whether it's holding space for them or it's making sure and reminding them of the things that they have to do to kind of overcome the challenges that they're dealing with. And then the adults, when I think of specifically the parents that I work with, um, it's also, I always like to paint the picture. How were you raised? Okay.
Mhm.
How did that serve you? All right, let me tell you about inner child. And so I break down like these different types of inner child and how they tend to show up. And so that first session or two, we have a 6 week parenting workshop series that we do. And that first session is literally all about the parent, how they were raised, how that shows up in their parenting, what that looks like, and how we can start to shut some of those things down that we didn't like about how we were raised and start to do it differently with our children. And it's such an eye-opening thing for them because one, we see them, we validate their struggle, we validate who they are, and we validate how why it's such a challenging thing for them to parent now, where it seems so different from how we were raised. And they're able to start to see a different side or see a different possibility when it comes to this journey, because it's helping them, like we said before, understand about your young person in a way that they never understood them. Like, oh man, I get so frustrated when they struggle with this. Well, that part of their brain doesn't really mature until they're 25, and they're like, oh my gosh, it's information
Right,
that
right.
they haven't wasn't able to hear before. So I think it's for me, when I think of my students, it's that awareness, same for the adults as well. And it's then how do we equip them with different coping skills that helps them deal with their stress. I say I do the same with the adults because they can't, as you said earlier, with the teachers. If I'm stressed out all the time, it's going to be very hard for me to give what I need to give to my students, to my family, to my parents. And so I always say you got to prioritize you first, take care of you first, fill your cup first, then that allows you to be in the overflow to take care of the people that you're responsible for.
Definitely. And I heard you kind of allude to one of the concepts that I have been noticing a whole lot as I go into schools. And I've been noticing with both students and adults. I do a lot of work with both, but that's self-sabotage.
Yes.
Talking
Mhm.
negatively to yourself instead of speaking life into
Yes.
whatever it is that you're encountering. I think that teaching that as a toxic concept and making
Mhm.
us aware of what's going on, because sometimes we say things that don't even realize that we're self-sabotaging ourselves. I only got on social media 8 years ago. I've been on about 8 years, but you got people that's been on for 20.
Mhm.
I said that I didn't like it. I wasn't going to do it. And I self-sabotaged my way out of doing it because of my mentality. And so often we do those type of things to ourselves. We don't allow ourselves to go for that particular dream. We don't allow
Mhm.
ourselves to participate in this conference that we wanted to participate in, or we don't go to an event that we were supposed to be at and things of that nature. So as we think about all of that, what are some practical steps that educators and leaders can kind of take to foster change?
It's understanding why it's so easy for us to think negatively than it is to think positively, right? Like that part of our brain that, our thoughts. I've heard the stat of 15 to 60,000 thoughts a day, and 80% of those thoughts are negative, and 90% of those thoughts are repetitive. I think I'm messing the numbers up, but they're just as high. They're high. So, like, if we're
Yeah.
having negative thoughts, the majority of our thoughts are negative, and then they're repetitive thoughts. it just makes it so much easier for us to think negatively, to talk down on ourselves, to do those things. And so, it's funny. I tell this joke about how when I was growing up, I didn't like positive people. Like overly positive people would get on my nerves for some reason. I would be so bothered. And then I realized like um, overly positive people stand out in a majority negative world. And that's why I
Mm,
was so, because they just stood out to me. And it was so like, why are they so happy? Right. But
right.
also, I realized because of that stat about us having majority negative thoughts, I realized that people that are positive work that much harder to stay positive in a world that's
Right.
mostly negative. And so when I break that down, it's just us understanding like you're not weird, you're not crazy for thinking negatively all the time. It's just kind of how we're wired. And so the reality is, how do we take little small steps each day, each moment to combat those negative thoughts? And so the challenge that I always do with my students, especially those who deal with anxiety, it's a lot of times when they're having anxious moments or thoughts, it's it's they're anxious about something that hasn't happened yet, right? Either a test or a friend that they're embarrassed that something might happen. And so I always paint the picture of like, hey, this hasn't happened yet. So it's not the reality. The reality is you try and then, we get to a point or we tell the truth, right? What's the truth?
Right.
Because a lot of times our negative thoughts don't tell the truth. It's a lie. And so how do we tell the truth in that moment? And so those for me, that's a step that I'm able to take with my students to help eliminate those limiting beliefs that keep us from shifting our mindset in a direction that's going to allow us to grow and become a better version of ourselves.
I love it. I love it. Grow and become a better version of ourselves. That's the ultimate goal. That's really what it's all about. That's why we're here. That's why we participate in professional development. That's why
Mhm.
we that's why we exist, to be better, to grow. And the only way that you can grow is to put yourself in uncomfortable situations.
Yep.
I know that growth comes through discomfort and dealing with those generational curses. It can be uncomfortable, but we
Mhm.
got to be able to tackle them head on in order to keep moving forward. And as we keep moving forward with our conversation, we talked a little bit about change, but what are some actionable strategies that we can also do to kind of move forward with breaking those actual curses?
It's an exposure to therapy or some form of it, right? Like,
Mhm.
I think so many of the communities that are impacted by curses see therapy as something that is not for them. And so it's breaking the stigma of mental health and helping us understand that it's just as important as our physical health or our spiritual health. It's removing the stigma in some form or fashion in your educational space or in your dialogue with the community, whatever it might be, whatever responsibility you have to be able to spread that message, we got to spread it. And so, as a Black man, I'm very vocal on social media, or at least I was when I was going through therapy on a consistent basis. I was sharing moments that I had in therapy. I was sharing the tough times that I had. Oh man, I had a rough therapy session, right? Like on social media, just letting people know, like, hey, I'm this person that you see, experiencing all these things, having all of this success. I gotta get help. I gotta get help because what we didn't talk about earlier is the thing called ACEs, adverse childhood experience, ACE score. For my educators, you should know about that. I just presented in Orlando. My presentation is about surviving 10, being an A score of 10, and showing the educators how they can help a student deal with their trauma, manage their trauma. How does a person, if you know anything about the stats, I'll just share one. If uh, people who score 6 or higher, their lifespan was shortened potentially by 20 years versus somebody who didn't have an A score at all. And so you're talking impact that could happen that trauma has on us personally, but a person who's able to overcome that is just a whole big thing. So I always just kind of share about how we take that trauma, that pain, um, and I guess what goes hand in hand with trauma is our resilience factor, or those things that are able to help us go through. It's mentoring, it's being involved in the community, all these different things that kind of help you combat the trauma that you're dealing with. Those are like the exposure that we need to help people understand how we can start to move past those generational curses, those generational patterns.
Thank you so much for that. That's a tough one. That's a tough one every single time. Because again, those mindsets and transforming it can be difficult. And sometimes we don't have the discipline that it takes to put our mind in those places and those spaces where we can keep moving forward. We have really kind of dug in today. I want to, before we get ready to close out with our final question, I want to get the crowd involved again. What is one step that you could take to foster change in your school or community? One step, you all. Think about that. Something that you can do here in the next month or so, within the next few weeks. If you can't do it before school year ends this year, maybe it's something that you can have in place when we come back after January. But what is one step that you can take this week to foster change, to foster the breaking of community or generational curses within your school or community? Wow, DJ. Wow, we have really kind of dug in here today. And we've talked a little bit about what leaders can do to put students and adults in better situations where they can bridge those gaps and connect better as well. One of the things that I talk about with leaders is that they've got to ensure that they too are providing themselves with the professional development, the personal development that they need to keep getting better, to keep growing, and to stay ahead of the craft, so to speak, to be able to put everyone else in different situations where they can continue to be successful. So with that in mind, what or how can leaders model this transformation in their own lives throughout the year?
It's well, obviously being able to take care of yourself and being loud about how you do that, right? And I seen this debate recently about, people doing self-care, and you either gonna self-care or you're gonna crash out is the term, and they say pick your invoice. But the reality is self-care doesn't have to be expensive, but it will be expensive if you don't take care of yourself. And so I think the way that we model it is we express those ways that we do take care of ourselves. So for me, with my students, I'm always reminding, hey, I got to go to the gym after I leave here. Because if I don't, I'm gonna be stressed out. It's gonna be crazy, right? So my students are involved in my gym journey. And I'm a bodybuilder. I've been since 2022, and so my students ask me like, "Hey, when is your next show or when is your next competition?" So they're involved. They know like DJ works out, and that's an example. And they'll ask me like, "Hey, some advice on food," or "I'm trying to get this bigger. What exercises can you recommend?" And so I'm loud and not like rambunctious or I can't. That's a different word I want to use. But basically, I'm loud in the sense of like, "Hey, I'm taking care of myself." And I need you to understand that it's important for you to do the same. And so that's an example. I think it's just as loud as you are about like taking care of yourself within reason. I know certain educators, you feel like you can't share too much with your students, but letting them know the struggles and the challenges that you deal with, or the struggles and challenges that you did deal with, right? How open can you be with that? I've let my students know, hey, my mom just passed away recently. I'm struggling, but I'm going through, I'm working through it. I'm be better. And it gives them an opportunity to be empathetic to your situation, to you for a minute, but also help them understand you're a human being. And I try to paint the picture of that all the time when I work with students, when I work with adults. It's helping them understand I'm human, right? No matter how much you feel I'm an accomplished person and all the things that I have going on in my life, at the end of the day, I'm human. I like to say I'm toe up from the flow up. I'm just trying to figure this thing out. And the more I try to, paint that picture of the type of person that I am, that's just trying to, work through it and get it together. It just makes you more real to them, because I think as educators we're separated, like we have a society that has a hierarchical stance or view where the adult is up here and the child is down here, and so they see us in that light and they see us in that way, and they don't see us struggling in ways because we don't share it. And the more we can kind of separate that or increase that gap, I should say, the more it helps them understand, okay, the struggles that I'm dealing with are so similar to the struggles that my adult peer or adult folks in my life are dealing with. And so it makes it easier for them to be able to manage those challenges that they're dealing with. So show up, show that you're doing your self-care, be as open as you can with the struggles that you're dealing with. And that's just one way to open a door to be able to connect better, and be able to lead by example and show how you are managing through the challenges that you're dealing with.
That's awesome. And what I heard from what you said and what I took away from what you said was that the better I understand my individuality, the better
Mhm.
I'm able to understand diversity.
Yeah.
So the better I understand that I have issues, the better I'm able to understand that other people also have
Yeah.
issues.
Yep.
Individuality and diversity, they go hand in hand. Keeping that self-awareness at a peak level allows us to also keep that social awareness at a peak level, because
Hmm.
you can't respect individuality fully without respecting diversity fully. You can't respect diversity fully without respecting individuality fully. And all of that leads to connection.
Hmm.
Wow. Wow, this has been empowering. It's been impactful. DJ, I want you to be able to definitely let people know how they can locate you, how they can find you. I know that you're a professional speaker as well, and that you would probably do some consulting. You do some consulting as well,
Yep.
and
Yep.
all of that. So I want you to be able to leave a final word as well as give out your information.
Yeah, I think I really just felt on my heart to speak to the educators, specifically the teachers. We are have been in a climate that feels kind of daunting. I feel like over the next year or so, it's going to be even more daunting. But I just want to remind you of the students that you get to serve every single day. And as frustrating, as irritating it could be, with them not turning their assignments, with them asking you how they can make up late work. I know all the frustrations that might be there for you. But I want you to know that every chance and moment that you show up is the moment that a student is going to be saved from the situation that they're in. And I know that seems dramatic and that might seem like you're not making that big of a deal, but I need you to understand that the impact that you have is overwhelming. It's huge. And a lot of times teachers, if I could just remind you, you have more interactions with your students than even their parents have sometimes. And so you do play an important role in the lives of these young people. And I just want to remind you of that. I want to remind you of that message so that you can keep fighting the good fight. We're almost halfway through. You make it to Christmas break. Make sure you take care of yourself. Make sure you don't be with those stressful family members that be getting on your nerves. I need you to replenish. I need you to be good so we can finish out this year strong and so you can continue to be the wonderful, powerful educator that you are to the students that you get to serve. So I wanted to just speak to them for a moment. And then for those who just want to get connected with me, I'm DJ Inspires All on Instagram, on Twitter, I believe on there's some different new apps, Threads. So you should be able to find me there at DJ Inspires All. And, or you could just go to my website at djinspires.com, djinspires.com, and you can get to know me on there as well. So thank you, Dr. Joe, for the opportunity to speak on your platform and share a message with your folks.
Definitely. Thank you for joining the platform. Thank you for blessing the platform with your presence and your information, because we gained a lot today. I know that
Mhm.
people that are watching had an opportunity to grow. We shared our various strategies. We talked in depth about something that we don't talk about enough. But
Yeah.
today's conversation, it reminds us that generational curses, they don't have to define you. They're not the end all, be all. You determine your future. Don't let your past determine what happens next for you. You're in charge of
Mhm.
that. So with that, I definitely want to also remind everyone, again, I got that 2-for-1 going on, 2-for-1 services going on up through December 13th. You definitely want to make sure you get in with that. Also going with that is the Global DNA Behavior Leadership Assessment, doing that for individuals as well as teams. Make sure you check out my works, you all. Please check out my works, educational leadership work, DIP approach for students and adult success. That's the SEL curriculum. I've got the DIP approach for educators, discipline culture plus instructional practice equals performance, and the latest book, Empowering Educational Communities, a guide for teacher principal collaboration. And finally, if you need to contact me, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm Joe at drjoegriffinspeaks.com. There's my website. There's also my telephone number for those that want to give me a call. Otherwise, let's continue to always be inspired, be motivated, be your best at all times. Remember that you are worthy. Dr. Joe here, you are always speaking and writing life into you. Signing off.